We're just gathering our audience. And we should be live. Just looking to make sure it's showing up. There we are. Hi, everybody. It's Abe Bonowitz and Jeff Hood. Death penalty action and the Free Anthony Sanchez campaign. We're live. It's Friday afternoon. Jeff is burning up there outside, wearing his fancy duds in McAlester, Oklahoma. Jeff, what's going on in McAlester, Oklahoma today?
Man, definitely hot. There's no doubt about that. I spent the day in the prison with Anthony Sanchez. He's in good spirits. He's, one of the things that he wanted everybody to know and wanted to tell everybody is just keep fighting, keep fighting, keep fighting. And that's what we're going to do. And now we find ourselves out here next to one of Anthony's billboards, right behind me. Evidence unraveled, the fight to free Anthony Sanchez. Watch the film at freeanthonysanchez.org. And so, we're making a lot of progress down here in McAlester. And I hope this progress leads us all the way to a joyous celebration of a stay and eventually of an exoneration.
An exoneration. So what's Anthony, has he been able to see any of the recent news coverage or about the billboards, or has anybody said anything to him?
He has. Actually, guards in the prison have repeatedly said things to him about seeing his face all over McAlester and then seeing his face at work. And, jokingly telling him that they're tired of seeing his face all over the place. So he's very aware. He's very thankful. And he is just encouraging us to keep going.
Well, that's amazing. Have any of the guards told him that they've watched the film?
Well, I don't know that they've said they've watched the film, but it wouldn't surprise me if they had.
Yeah, well, when you talk to him again tonight, if he calls you, you could remind him to tell, hey, have you watched the film? Because that's what we're asking everybody to do, and that's why we put the money into putting those billboards up in McAlester, so that the prison community can understand who they've got on death row, and that maybe they'll be executing an innocent person if it gets down to it on September 21st. So, how's it look to you? What do you think about that billboard? Seeing it in person. Jeff? Oh, Jeff, you froze up. Jeff, can you hear me? Ah, Jesus. All right. Well, we're going to see if Jeff can come back in. He's down there in the boonies where they might not have a very strong signal. We'll see. But I'm going to text him real quick. We're talking about, it looks like he's going to come back in. Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood has been visiting with Anthony Sanchez in McAlester, Oklahoma, on the death row, where Anthony is currently facing execution in just 6 weeks from yesterday. So less than 6 weeks. And that's why we were showing that billboard. It's the first time Jeff has been there since we put them up. They went up a week ago. Actually, they went up this past Monday. So let's see if Jeff comes back in. And if he doesn't, then we're going to just watch this film. And I want to encourage everybody to go to freeanthonysanchez.org, watch the film, sign the petition, get involved, and know that you can have a hand in helping free an innocent person, stopping an execution that should not happen. No execution should happen, of course, but especially not executions of people that are wrongly convicted. When there's so many questions about the guilt of Anthony Sanchez, we believe there's other suspects. We've now that Anthony's attorneys who abandoned him have withdrawn formally, and their withdrawal motion was accepted by the judge in the case. So now Anthony is free to pick another attorney and to move forward with his innocence claims. That's what's happening. I'm going to guess that Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood's phone must have lost power or something, or probably more likely overheated. So here's what I'm going to do. Instead, I'm going to show you the let's see, this is the web page, freeanthonysanchez.org. And you can go to this webpage and learn all about the case and why we think it's a deep concern. And here's the police sketch. Look at that. And here are the issues that we're raising and what we're asking people to do. And here's more information and all of that. And that's what's going on. So we're going to watch this film now. It's just 23 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and run this, and there it is. So have a great Friday afternoon. You can watch this yourself at freeanthonysanchez.org or deathpenaltyaction.org, and make it a great day. Here we go. And I want to warn you, there are some moments of difficulty here. So if you're easily, it talks about sexual violence, so be careful about that. If that could be a concern for you, then maybe don't watch. Oh, there's Jeff. Here, I'll pause this. All right,
Hey, brother.
Back.
Sorry about that.
Your phone must have overheated.
Yeah, it got so hot the phone shut off. But I just thinking about all of these people driving by as I was waiting on my phone to cool off. But it's interesting when we talk about these billboards. We think about them, we paid some money and got a good message out there, and we'll reach a couple of people. It's even more than that. It's an invitation. It's an invitation to repentance. It's an invitation to turn away from these executions, to turn away from our racism, our classism, all of the pieces of evil that go into these executions, and in particular that go into the case of Anthony Sanchez. This is an opportunity for people to turn back and not do, this, go through with this great evil. And so again, as people drive by, I feel like, and Abe, you're going to really appreciate this, I feel almost like an evangelist out here encouraging people to just turn away from killing, turn away from racism, turn away from classism. You do not have to do this. Anthony Sanchez is an innocent man, and you don't have to have any particular religious belief, any particular, whatever kind of belief. All you got to do is watch the film and know that this is an innocent man, and it is a core part of humanity. First of all, that we don't kill people, and second of all, we sure as hell don't kill innocent people. We don't punish innocent people. And so it's a powerful thing to be out here and seeing.
Amen. Amen. Hallelujah.
Right. It's a powerful thing to see people out here slowing down, giving a hand wave or anything like that. And as conservative of a place as McAlester, Oklahoma.
All right. Well, Jeff, I know you got a long drive back to Little Rock today. Did anybody bring you any of the yard signs today?
I don't have any yard signs, but thankfully I got a lot of good time with Anthony, and his spirits are high, and so as long as his spirits are high, I feel like I'm doing my job. And now I'm here helping everybody get their spirits high, so we can just keep our spirits high. We're gonna stop this thing.
All right, where's that billboard from where you're sitting right now?
So I'm at Monroe and Maine.
Right, but can you see it? Can you show it to us again?
Monroe, Maine, and let me turn the camera around. You can see it. It's right there.
There it is. Okay, so let me just spotlight you so we can see it. There we are. So there's one of the billboards. We've got 3 billboards up in McAlester. This is the the prison town where the death row prison and the executions take place. And we put up 3 billboards so that Anthony Sanchez, so people can watch the film, Evidence Unraveled, the fight to free Anthony Sanchez. It's just 23 minutes. We're going to watch it here in a moment. And I don't think anybody's ever done anything like this before, but we're doing it because we think it might make a difference. And if you want to help us keep these billboards up, then please go to freeanthonysanchez.org and make a donation as much as you can, because we need all the money we can get together to keep this moving. So, Jeff, any final thoughts before we're going to show the film?
Let's see.
Oh, you're muted.
I hate it when that happens. I was just going to say, finally, as always, thank you, Abe, for leading the way on the campaign side. You know, it's awesome to see these billboards. It's awesome to see this film. And it's awesome to know that we can put these types of resources together to try to save Anthony's life. And for that matter, pulling all these resources together to end the death penalty as a whole. You know, it's not, obviously we love Anthony and this moment is all about Anthony, but you know, our work is about something much bigger and much greater than just one case or one person. We're trying to end this thing everywhere. So thank you, Abe, and y'all keep the faith.
Well, I'm not going to go so far as to say I love Anthony, but I know what you're talking about. And
I love you too. Abe. I love you too. Okay, y'all.
I know I was making a joke there, man.
All right.
So
all right, my man. Y'all keep the faith. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care. So we're going to go back to watching the film. This is Evidence Unraveled, the fight to free Anthony Sanchez. We'll just back this up just a little bit. And again, you know, there's some depictions of graphic violence and some descriptions, and so we'll just be aware of that.
On December the 20th, 1996, Julie Buskin was abducted from her apartment complex, driven out to Lake Stanley Draper, and executed, murdered on the shore. For years, authorities had very little evidence and no suspects to go on. They found a trace amount of DNA on a leotard that was found close to the body of Julie Buskin. Using that trace amount, they claim to 6 or 7 years later get a random match on Anthony Sanchez. Anthony Sanchez was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death based on that trace amount of DNA.
It seems like the prosecutors, I mean, they just made up a story. I don't know where they got it from. They wouldn't let none of his family come in the trial. He had to sit there by himself.
What was Anthony like growing up?
He was a happy kid. He had a smile on his face all the time. I mean, he had the biggest grin. If you look at any of his pictures, he's got this big grin. And he was real loving. He's real soft-hearted. From a baby on, he was a good kid.
When he got a death sentence, what was your reaction? What was that like?
It was the worst day of my life, you know, and there's nothing you can do. As a mother, you want to help him and save him, and it was bad. It was just heartbreaking. He had an attorney, a real hateful attorney. I tried to tell him, you know, you need to defend him, and he said, well, we're not trying to get him out right now. We're just trying to keep him off death row. Well, why would you not bring up the evidence that's going to prove his innocence instead of just trying to get him off death row?
So you feel like in the midst of the entire trial and the entire process, there was nobody defending Anthony?
Nobody.
When I met Anthony Sanchez last fall, I sat down with him and he began to talk to me about innocence, and I didn't really know what to think, because I hear about innocence from these guys a lot.
You know, at death penalty action, we take every case in order. I mean, we address every single execution, whether they're guilty or innocent. So, you know, this one sort of came onto our radar as one of the 25 in Oklahoma. But when Jeff came and said, you know, this guy says he's innocent, I think he's full of it, I said, great, you know, we'll just do what we usually do.
But, you know, as I kind of pushed more and more into this case, again, it started becoming stranger and stranger as to how this was pinpointed to be Anthony.
But then Jeff came back and said, I think he's innocent, and we need money for testing and an investigator and all this. I didn't know what that was going to take, but I sent a text to one of my best and longest donors, and you know, within half an hour she wrote back and said yes. And that's what allowed us to get to the point that we're at today, where there's an independent investigator who's putting his jobs with the state on the line to come out and counter the narrative of the state.
My name is David Ballard. I'm a CLEAT licensed private investigator. I am also an expert witness and an instructor on courses approved for investigators and law enforcement. For the last 11 years, I've worked as a private investigator on crime scenes and on evidence and forensics, ballistics. Pretty much my expertise was anything violent crime. Back in December of 22, I was contacted by one of the attorneys for Anthony Sanchez. Needed someone who was familiar with DNA and crime scenes, follow up on some evidence and try to reach out and find other DNA evidence and have it tested. Well, initially, when I got some of the documentation or some interviews and the sketches, the first impression was the sketch, that nothing about the sketch appeared to match Anthony. Then went through some of the witness statements. It very quickly had to move to trying to locate an item with DNA for his dad, Glenn Sanchez. So involved reaching out to Charlotte, his ex, and start from there. But when I met with her, she was very open to talk to me and was very, forthcoming with information. And then I told her that I had been informed that at some point she may have heard a confession or a statement, and it turned out to be 3 different incidents where Glenn Sanchez had confessed he had killed Julie Buskin, that he should have done a better job getting rid of her, and that Anthony was taking it like a man.
It was probably about 2014. He said, at least Anthony's taking it for me. He said, I'm the one that did it. He said that, she had a tight ass. And he kept on bragging about it because he said no one will ever know. It seemed like every few months he'd talk about it. And I'd ask him, why are you letting Anthony suffer for it? And he said, well, because he can handle it. And he said, Anthony doesn't know. Whenever I die, no one will know the truth about what happened to Julie.
Did Glenn ever give any sort of details or anything like that when he was making these types of comments?
Yeah, well, he would turn around saying that he tied her up, he hog-tied her, and he said he raped her.
But as I was interviewing Charlotte, she was the first one to tell me that one of the reasons Anthony didn't finish school was because Glenn would beat on him so bad. Sometimes he was just too beat up to go to school, that he put hands on her. He would, literally just go off, black out, and become very violent. So now you've got he's got a propensity towards a potential for violence towards women and other people, but sometimes, that's interfamily, not that it makes it better, but where do you go from there? It was when she started talking about his sexual behavior too that really stood out. Aggressive when told no, had issues with performance and blamed it on women. A lot of times making them do things face down, didn't want them looking at him, including trying to force women to have sex with animals, sodomizing them with handles to hammers, waking up and being bound, and him assaulting them.
The abuse grew with time. It was sexual abuse. He figured if a baby can come out of it, a fist can go in it. Mm. And if I screamed, he would go further. Mm. And he'd go in my butt too. And, I was afraid to say something because he'd always say, if you say anything, if I don't do it, somebody else will, I'll kill you. I'd come out of the room crying or something, and, or else I'll flip out on my kids over him. Why don't you get rid of him? Well, I was afraid to. I got where I was scared myself that, are you going to harm my kids? Or are you going to try to harm me?
I mean, you take that piece and then you add in the fact of, according to Charlotte and then Glenn's own words to the detectives, he went by Draper all the time. Matter of fact, in one of the interviews when they're asking about Anthony, they're trying to establish if Anthony was familiar with Lake Draper. They asked Glenn, have you ever taken Anthony fishing there? And he said, yeah, something like when he was a kid. They said, where'd you like to go? And he tells them, oh, I was over there by the bridge. And he was referring to the dam. He talks about the dirt road, the gravel. And, off the beaten path. And the detective put in his report that he thought that was interesting because that is right next to where they found Julie Buskin's body. I believe Anthony's first attorneys even thought it might be Glenn because Anthony got upset about that because at that point no one had any inclination that way. But we're not the only ones. The detective also was looking pretty hard at Glenn, but couldn't get there at that time.
They stuck with Anthony Sanchez because the poor kid, they already had this whole narrative built up. They already were able to take the DNA, manipulate it, make it fit, and they didn't take the time to investigate Glenn Sanchez.
There's a lot that goes into any kind of forensic evidence. You have to be very careful with how you move it, package it. They started with a cowboy hat, but they got a mixed DNA sample, which also aided to what my position was on the DNA, is you cannot get an exact 100% single profile when you have mixed DNA because you can't always separate the two. And you can even get DNA that masks over another to where you can't see it. They came back with a cowboy hat in February stating that it was mixed, but they could move to the toothbrush. And in March they were able to do the toothbrush and pull a single profile. So the profile we got was a male profile, but again, this is from his hygiene kit, but we have to ask the question, making sure that it's for sure Glenn's DNA profile, but based off what we've seen. The next thing was comparing it to what we had already supplied of a DNA chart that was given to me from Anthony's legal team. And matter of fact, when I first saw that document, I think we had a meeting right after, and I had an issue as soon as I saw the first table that had all the DNA profiles. And that was because Julie Buskin had matching DNA numbers in her loci that matched Anthony. And not just Anthony, but a prior person who'd been looked at as a suspect in 3 separate loci, complete matches, which that should not happen unless you're a relative. In this case, the only matching numbers came from the leotard. That was interesting because that in the statements of the evidence that was found is that there was no items that did not contain mixed DNA. Matter of fact, the leotard contained what seemed like a smear of potentially fecal matter and what they believed to be spermatozoa. So that was odd to me that they, one, got 100% match on any item, especially since some of the other items, underwear, things like that, did not have those kind of matches. And you would assume the underwear she was wearing was going to have a lot more of a match to it than anything else.
It's interesting. You keep on hearing the state say, well, you've got to trust the DNA. The DNA is going to show us the truth. And it sounds like from where you sit, your persuasion, the DNA is showing us the truth. And that is that Anthony is innocent.
Yes. Well, one, the DNA, the sheets that we have were someone generated. They're not like the benchmarks you get, the lab notes, and all the details that would be in there of how they broke it down. And the thing to remember is, I believe 5 different technicians worked this evidence. And from 97, when the first test was done, they were able to pull 4 loci on a profile, to all the way till 2000 when they do a PCR, and now they get, I believe, 13 loci is what they said. But as they're going, they're swabbing and doing this and testing this evidence. Typically, and I think I've given you this reference that I've heard before, imagine taking a picture and putting it on a copier and keep copying it and keep copying it. You don't get a stronger picture by doing that. And there was a swatch cut out of the leotard that was used for testing, and a swatch, 2 inch by 2 inch square that contains the most evidence. And typically you swab those, you don't actually do it on that item. And that plays an important fact, because at one stage in this case, when DNA was challenged, it was a letter that I'm in receipt of now, the DA's office, saying that items were consumed and were no longer available. And I believe we had a conversation about that, and I said that could be a problem because you should swab every bit of it. And they said swabs were put away in storage. Also, one of the evidence items that they listed that were taken, this is when Melissa Keith comes in, is she said she received one large envelope and literally all the evidence was stuffed into one envelope.
So all the swabs, everything stuffed in one envelope.
One big giant envelope.
What was going on in Oklahoma City at the Oklahoma City lab during that time?
During that time was not a really good time for Oklahoma City Crime Lab. That was during the Joyce Gilchrist days, where it came out that she had altered evidence or falsified reports. And I forget how many, it was a bunch of cases, drug on for a number of years of them figuring out how many cases she actually did it on. That she had either falsified evidence or just straight lied about it on the reports.
So as you go down this DNA trail and you begin to realize, that there are these issues, you've got Melissa Keith at the trial on the stand saying this is a 100% match. How possible is a 100% match under normal circumstances, and then how possible is a 100% match under these circumstances?
So 100% match is, you're going to put a swab in your mouth, take it out, and it gets packaged right or directed right there at the lab. Then you're going to get a very clean match. But from a crime scene with mixed DNA, and then 8 years later, after it's been handled how many times? Your chances of success on a 100% match are going to get real slim. I've only received partial, at this point, because of what it related to, it was Melissa Keith's testimony at the trial. And initially she talks about how the match worked and all this, but when she gets pressed on, and I believe it's in the transcript, that's where she states that, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but basically she didn't get a full match, but based off her knowledge and training, she felt like it was good enough or a strong enough match.
Greetings. This is Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood, spiritual advisor for Anthony Sanchez. I'm joined by David Ballard, who is the investigator on the case. In this video, we want to talk about why a shoe print that they cited is erroneous and should have never been included as evidence.
Yeah, as you said, Jeff, there was a shoe print that was found at the scene, and then it was stated that it matched potentially a shoe print of a style and type of shoe that Anthony Sanchez may have owned at one time. However, again, you're talking about a mass-produced shoe, and even if you go with that and say that, yes, Anthony could have owned this type of shoe, the problem is that it was a size 9 shoe, and Anthony Sanchez, even at the time when he was just 9 months past being 18 years old, that didn't match his shoe size at that time anyway. And I believe the reference to a shoe was something from much earlier on in his life, which was a very common shoe type. And you also have to go back to, there's been a lot of developments in processes in crime scenes, and a lot of these techniques, they can be supportive, but they're not absolute. The questions I have for this case are, one, the DNA, the lab notes, the collection process, chain of custody. There's a lot of documentation missing. 2 would be any kind of photographs or anything of how the packaging of the evidence was. Next would be the likelihood of getting it retested, because that's the best way to answer the question. Retest the evidence, compare it all now and see what we have. The fingerprints. If you didn't get Anthony's, compare them to Glenn's. Compare Glenn's DNA. At least then it'd be ruled out, because what if it isn't Glenn? There's always that chance. A fingerprint from Glenn Sanchez on her car would be huge, because there should be no reason whatsoever his fingerprints should be there. What about the pajama bottoms? What about the other underwear that are all in her car and not readily accessible? But all those came back nothing to Anthony, and they said they found all kind of DNA evidence on that stuff. So where are those profiles? Instead of trying to make the evidence match Anthony, let the evidence tell you what it's trying to tell you. One of my requests would be for them to test Glenn Sanchez against CODIS, because one of Glenn's own family members stated that they actually turned him in on another case because they saw a sketch that they thought resembled him, and it was a woman who was assaulted and murdered not far from Norman.
So there is suspicion out there that Glenn Sanchez could have been a serial killer.
It's what, as I understand it. We have evidence right now in the possession of the state that could exonerate Anthony Sanchez, and not just exonerate him, but potentially give us the suspect, the person responsible. And if we have that capability and we have the evidence, why in the world would we not do it?
Do you think there is any way possible that Anthony could be guilty of the murder of Julie Buskin?
No. He was what would you call it, like a sweetheart. He just, a lovable kid.
We want to know the truth. We know that Anthony Sanchez did not do this. The evidence is clear. But even if you still believe that he did do this, shouldn't it be investigated on a much deeper level, where all of these questions that we are bringing up just aren't left out there? You see, if Anthony Sanchez is executed, the truth will be executed. The questions will remain and the truth will be executed. So we are asking you to stand with us to give life to the truth, to give life to a deeper investigation, and to give life to the memory of Julie Buskin.
So I'm Abe Bonowitz with Death Penalty Action, and we operate hand to mouth, but what we have is massive impact. And it's because of people who support the work, who make a donation, go to deathpenaltyaction.org and donate, that we're able to do this work. So I'm asking you today, if you value what we're trying to do, and if you are able to, please chip in. Whatever you can, if it's $5 or $5 million, you give it to us, we will use it to create change, to stop executions.